Hash and circle up.
Welcome to On, the Hash House Harrier podcast for interviews, history, and stories. I'm your host, Ra.
Today in the podcast, looks like we're in a cornfield, but not really, but we're in Omaha, Nebraska with a hasher who started in Asia, found it there, and then has been hashing for decades in the States, all over America, and has founded and created a specific Facebook hash group that you may not have heard of. We'll hear all about that. That's a big part of his life and hashing world. Welcome today on the podcast, Woody Pecker. It's hard to say. Okay, Woody, let's tell people your hashing origin story. When, where, and how did you get to your first hash?
Well, I started with the 𝐏𝐨𝐝𝐚𝐬𝐭 Hash House Harriers just outside of Osan Air Base in Songtan, South Korea. I got stationed in Korea in 98. I got there in about September of 98. I started hashing with Osan in November of 98. When I first got there, I had kind of seen the hashers. This was long before the days of social media and honestly cell phones back then. The way the kennel would advertise is at the post office, which everyone goes to the post office on base, they would write all the information in chalk on the sidewalk in front of the post office. And it always started at what we called the CE Hill. It was the CE squadron right by the main gate. So every single trail, our chalk talk was always there. We hashed every Saturday and every other Friday. So you could get in 6 a month. You would see the hashers, and like back then, every 10 runs, you got like a headband. It was like a streamer, and hashers would wear them around their waist like a hula skirt. So I had seen these guys and asking my friends, like, what are these guys? What are they doing? And they're like, oh, they're hashers. They're crazy. These guys go out and run like 20 miles in the woods and all that. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like anything I'm interested in doing. So it turned out a couple guys in my squadron. I was in the 5th Reconnaissance Squadron, also known as the Black Cats. Several of the guys in my squadron hashed, including my squadron commander. And it was a weekend before payday, so I was kind of a little low on funds. And I wanted to go out and have a few beers. My buddies were like, no, the hashing's not that bad. And your first one's free. Come out and have a couple beers and just see if it's something you're into. I showed up there. And the other big thing with them was it was an honor for a sponsor to get someone to come out for their virgin run quicker. So it was always like, what's your name? Where are you from? Who's your sponsor? And how long have you been in Korea? For me, I'd already been there 4 or 5 months. So everyone's boo, boo. I had a guy from my previous assignment in California. I was at Beale Air Force Base, just outside of Sacramento. I knew he was coming in. So I literally pretty much grabbed him right off what we called the Freedom Bird, dropped his stuff off at his room and drug him right out to a hash. So I'd been here for 8 hours. So that was always more celebrated, is to get out. But yeah, so that's how I found them. And as soon as I did one trail, I knew I was hooked, and it was definitely going to be something I was going to be involved in.
That's great. Tell people it's like, so this is 1998. What was the makeup in terms of gender, rank, and that kind of stuff?
Back then, Osan was a pretty thriving kennel. I have one video I did of a hash, and you can see just from us at the chalk talk before the trail starts, there was roughly 60 to 80 people there. Our Saturday trails were usually high numbers like that. Our Friday trails or every others were usually around 20 or 30, but I would say it was a split right down the middle, just as many male, female. Rank was completely intermingled, and obviously, especially with the hash and the traditions of why we have hash names, we did not discuss rank at all. Everything was first name, where are you from, who's your sponsor, how long have you been in Korea, and that was it. And we did 5 hashes, or on your 6th hash, you got your hash name. So there were a few people that I hung out with in the kennel that we knew were officers, but it was something that basically wasn't spoken of because they could get in trouble if it came out that they were fraternizing on a regular basis off duty with enlisted people. So there was a good blend of them all in there, but
Technically it was against the rules, right?
Technically, yes. And officers are not supposed to fraternize with enlisted people off duty. So that was going all the way back to 𝐏𝐨𝐝𝐚𝐬𝐭 and those guys, just following that tradition of we only go by first names and that's it. We don't discuss rank or any of those things.
What was the committee like once you figured out there were leaders with official positions? What do you remember they had? Who was the key leader then?
Back then, we had a hash mouth and a grand master. So our hash mouth was basically our RA, and back then that was Sucks the Main Vein. He did the chalk talks, and these were pretty elaborate chalk talks. I haven't posted that video just because there's some people that are on it that don't want it posted, but it literally took up the size of a minivan on the ground. On one side, there was the Virgin line. On the other side, there was the Namer line, and then there was the hairline. It was pretty much the same marks every time. It was almost like watching an intro to a game show. He would go through these marks. Everyone would respond and chant in. It became this regular thing that it always went that way. Sucks the Main Vein did the chalk talk, bless the hairs, and then we would do Daddy Rabbit was our Father Abraham for the hash warm up to kill time. And then we would go. And then when we were done at the circle, Swallow the Leader was our hash master, and he would run the circle.
You said you were killing time. Was this live trails?
Yes, it was always live trails. When I was there, 𝐏𝐨𝐝𝐚𝐬𝐭 was still allowed on base. Anyone that knows Korea hashers knows possibly 𝐏𝐨𝐝𝐴, but everyone knows 𝐏𝐿 Kimchi. Obviously, they've got offshoots like the Colorado Kimchi and all of those. So when I was there, the 𝐏𝐿 Kimchi hash house harriers, which were up at 𝐏𝐿 Air Base, or is that Wolfpack? Anyway, they were not allowed on base anymore. They had gotten in trouble for leaving marks and things like that. So they always had to do their trails completely off base. And that was more kind of the downtown Seoul, 𝐏𝐴TWON district. I'm not sure how it is now because I left in September of '99. I did a year there, but we were allowed to be on base. We would always start at that one location on base. Whether or not the trail ended on base or ended off base just depended. We really didn't have an issue while I was there with having that. We had a pretty good understanding with the base. Actually, while I was there, the base commander, we had a change of command, was a hasher. But obviously, due to his position, could not hash. They made it very clear. Everyone knows who you are. You can't do it. So from where we started, if we immediately came back into the base, that was the officers area and general's row. So him and his wife would always just be sitting in their front yard with a beer, and we would just parade the whole kennel past them and just wave at them as we walked by. So at least we could say hi to them and they could participate in that method, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, that's great. All right, 6 runs. How'd you get your hash name?
There's an interesting story to this, and I'm going to throw one of my good brothers, Backdoor Dwarf, under the bus. When I was new in hashing and hanging out with all those guys, if you talk to anyone who knows me, they'll tell you Woody will bend your ear for an hour if you let him go, especially if he's got alcohol in him. So I used to love to tell my story of growing up with other people. I'm a 3rd-generation military brat, so my grandfather on my mother's side was in the Navy during Korea, but he worked the shipyards in Jersey, never went overseas. My grandfather on my father's side was a B-17 bombardier in World War II. He finished out a full career. He bombed in Korea and Vietnam. My dad and my uncle were both enlisted in Vietnam, and my mother was a WAF, a Women's Air Force member. When I was born in Michigan, when I was 6 months old, my family moved to the Philippines. We lived there for several years, so I kind of grew up as a little kid in the Philippines. And then we moved to New York, and I basically did my elementary years there, and then moved to Georgia, where I graduated high school and enlisted myself. So I kind of had a little bit of an Asian background growing up as a kid. When I got stationed in Korea, hanging out at the bars and everything around Filipinos, the Tagalog language just seemed familiar to me. And I wouldn't say that I was fluent, but I picked it up and could at least get around speaking it. So these guys knowing this, the Backdoor Dwarf especially, was like, you're already screwed. You're getting one of these 3 names. I already know it. You tell us anyone your life story, so it's either going to be Plebe. My last name is Jolly, so he's Jolly Rancher, gay farmer. That's probably going to be in there. Or fucking Flippy, because I was dating and speaking with Filipino girls down there. So on the day of my naming, now Osan didn't provide beer on trail. So we would, because we had so many people, we would get a 16-gallon keg, and that was at the on end. So if you want the free beer, haul ass, get in, and then you can have the free beer. If we had a beer check on trail, it would be like a convenience store or a bar, and it was on you. It was also known back then, and this all is going to come back around to the naming, that if you were a no-namer and you violated, you didn't drink. Your sponsor drank for you.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah. So on your naming, it was your sponsor's payback day. So the second you got your name, your sponsor was going to be calling you into the circle every 5 minutes to pay you back for all the downs they had done in your name. So we finished this trail off base, and we were in a field, and there was a tree line back in the distance. I got in, and I'm like, I'm going to be chugging. It was a drink it or wear it kennel. So I'm like, I'm going to be drinking a lot of beer. I want to get a couple in my system to prime the pumps for the downs. I had a few too many, if you want to say that. And I was like, man, I got to pee. But I'm like, I'm going to wait till they call us in for naming and kick us out, so then I can go pee and it's no big deal. But the circle was taking a long time, a lot of people to get through with other things. So I finally just said, screw it. I'm just going to sneak off, not ask permission, and just go pee in the woods. So I run out into the woods and was wearing old desert camo button fly pants. So I unbuttoned my pants and I started peeing. And sure enough, I immediately hear, time for the no-namers, where's no-name Jolly? And I'm like, God damn it. So I literally come, but all they see, they hear me go, I'm here. And everyone looks over and sees me running out of the tree line, like pulling my pants up and trying to button my fly. So they bring me in, they ask me questions, and they kick me out of earshot. Now, Dwarf's telling all these stories in one of these three names that he thinks I should get one of them. While this is going on, apparently a Harriet came walking out of the same area of the tree line, pulling her pants up. Apparently she was out there peeing too. I never saw her. I didn't even know she was there, but they saw her walking out, pulling her pants up. So the kennel decided that we were out there shagging in the woods. And when I heard my name being called for naming, that I chose not to finish with her and to run and get my name instead. So that's why they named me Woody Wouldn't Pecker.
Ah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, so they're going through all the names. So they're going through the names, and they list off all three of those names that Dwarf had said he was going to give me. And I'm like, oh God, they didn't give me one of these. What did I get? And then Swallow the Leader, henceforth and forevermore, Woody Wouldn't Pecker. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's actually really cool.
Great name.
And I'm like, I have no reference for why I just got this name, but I'm like, it's a good name. I ain't saying nothing. And then Dwarf and those guys come up and you are so lucky. That girl saved your ass. And I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Remind me again, what girl? And they're like, the girl that you were banging out in the woods and then you left. And I'm like, yes, that absolutely happened. That totally happened.
That's great. All right. What about mismanagement? Was there somebody in charge of the beer all the time, or is it rotating, and how'd that work?
Yeah. So we had a beer meister in Korea back then. You're on a 1-year short tour. So the average person doesn't have a vehicle. There's only so much vehicles and space on base. If you were enlisted, you had to be a tech sergeant or higher ranked or an officer in order to even be allowed to have a vehicle. What we did is the Hash actually at the time owned an old dually pickup truck. That's where we would keep the beer and all the Hash stuff. And we had a beer angel that was responsible for getting the keg. Then they would coordinate with the Hares and then make sure the vehicle was wherever we were going to be and have everything set up. Now, while I was there, the truck broke down. So the Hash pooled our resources and we bought an old GMC conversion van and stripped it out and then literally painted it yellow and then covered it in hash marks. And that became known as the Yellow Submarine.
That's great.
So that was the beer angel that was responsible for maintaining, like, all of our haberdashery and everything was always kept in the vehicle. And then he would use that for getting and transporting all the beer.
How long did it take you to start setting trails?
I started trails shortly after I got named. And a lot of times when I heard it was involved with my fellow booze hounds or juice Jedis or galactically stupids, like a lot of times we would volunteer as a group to do a trail and then I would always coordinate with them. My last hash I ever did in Korea was a galactically stupid, AKA released from rehab, because one of our galactically stupids had gotten drunk, streaked the base golf course, and had been arrested and had been in the ADAPT program, so he couldn't drink. And he finally graduated and was allowed to drink again. So we decided to all hare a trail so he could drink again. And that just happened to coincide with my last trail in Korea.
Now you've mentioned these subgroups,
Mhm.
and they all have their own initiation. Most people have never heard of these.
Okay. Yeah. So the first one and the most prominent, the original one was the booze hounds. Obviously, beer drinkers. The booze hounds would hang out a lot outside of the hash, go grilling or just go hang out. With a lot of kennels, people come out and hash together, but they don't necessarily all hang out outside. The booze hounds did. So once you got named, a booze hound could nominate you to join. If you were nominated, they would have a booze hound call. You would go down to this bar called the Tiger Club, which was the hash bar at the time when I was there. And all the booze hounds would be there. The sponsor would say, "This is Woody Pecker. I want to nominate him for taking the trial." And then everyone had to yes or no. If one person said no, you were out. But if everyone said yes, they had this mug that was a 1 liter mug, and you would get a mug of warm, crappy, flat Korean beer. You had 69 seconds or less to drink it. Once you started, your lips couldn't leave the vessel, and when you were done and you tipped it, if anything, even a drop of foam hit your head, you failed. On the mug was a picture with a time of the current record holder of who had done it the fastest. So
You remember what it was when you did it?
I can't remember what it was when I took my challenge, because we also were numbered. So I was booze hound number 199. But shortly after I became a booze hound, we had a guy that started hashing that was one of those open throat guys that could just throw down a beer like that. So all of us literally on the day of his naming were like, the second this hash is over, we're taking him right there because I want to see what this guy can do. And we named him Can't Beat That. And he did the challenge, and it was like 4.6 seconds.
Whoa.
He took the beer. And I don't know if that record ever got broke, because that was pretty crazy.
All right, what's the other group? What's the next group?
So then you had the Juice Jedis, which was started by Sucks the Main Vein, because he wasn't a big beer drinker. When you're in Korea, if you don't like beer, most people drink soju. It's like a Korean rice liquor.
And
So
there are good sojus, and there are some that aren't.
absolutely. You would go to the Tiger Club again, and there was no voting. It's if you were dumb enough to take the challenge and do it, then you were good. It was another 1 liter mug. You could choose with or without ice. So anyone who was smart chose with ice, because then when you topped it, it was okay if it hit your head because it's full of ice. But you had to drink 1 liter of soju in 99 seconds or less. And whether or not you did it, you immediately had to be taken back on base because you just chugged a liter of soju and they didn't want you getting drunk and stupid and doing something downtown and getting in trouble. So if you did that, I think I was Juice Jedi number 19 was my number. And then that was the thing, is if you were both a booze hound and a Juice Jedi, you automatically were galactically stupid because you drank both of them.
Okay, so we got this stuff going on. I just want to find out about the hash bar. What makes a bar there become or be the hash bar? What was their connection besides tradition? We always go to this bar. Was there anything else?
Yeah, it was already established when I got there. After I left, it has changed hands a few times. Outside of Osan, you literally walk out the main gate, and directly across the street is called the Xinjiang Arcade. It's kind of like a downtown Riverwalk if you want to compare it to something stateside. It's just restaurants and bars and shopping as far as the eye can see. Like 6 blocks all the way down to the train tracks, 3 stories high on both sides. When you went bar hopping, it was a beer bar, and you couldn't hit every single one in one night. The Tiger Club was second story, literally across from the gate. And that was it. So all the guys would get up there and just hang out the front window and catcall all the girls as they were coming by. But when you went into the Tiger Club, if you weren't a hasher and you stumbled in there, you figured out really quick it was the hash bar, because all the walls in the whole bar, like the owner, Mrs. Lee, had basically just had plywood on them, because hashers would sign your virgin hash when you got named, when you left. We had name streamers. Like when you left, you would put your name or streamer on the wall. There were a million photographs from people like hashing that would post them on there. There was underwear and ratty t-shirts and all kinds of other memorabilia. The whole place was just plastered in hash stuff.
That's great. All right. So you drank a liter of soju and they took you so you wouldn't get in trouble. What happened next?
Yes. So they bring me back on base to my buddy's dorm because the airmen dorms were kind of like a college dorm. You shared a bathroom with your neighbor, just a little room with two guys. If you were an NCO, you basically got an apartment. So my buddy was like, we're going to take you back. You can crash on my couch. We'll drink at my place. We're just getting you off base so you don't get in trouble with the town patrol or do something dumb. So we go in there, we're hanging out. In my alcoholic fervor, I decided I wanted to commemorate it by getting a tattoo of a harrow. At the time, because of sanitation reasons, you could not get a tattoo at Osan. It was illegal. So I get left unattended in the kitchen for 60 seconds. I get this bright idea. I pick up a serrated steak knife and I just start carving a harrow into my arm. And then I found a pen and I broke the big pen and rubbed the ink into my forearm, which I thought at the time looked amazing.
I'm sure it was a piece of art with quotation marks. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was terrible. And I woke up the next morning and sobered up and looked at it. And it was the most ridiculously horrible thing I've ever seen. And you could barely even tell it was a harrow. So I decided I've got to fix this. So let's numb the pain. So I drink a whole bunch of soju again to kill the pain. And I pull out a razor blade the next night and tried to cut as much of it out as I could to try to erase it. And
you didn't get in trouble for this. This didn't this didn't get infected or anything. Yeah.
No, luckily it didn't. But yeah, I got some of it, but not all of it. And then I carried what was left on my arm up until May 3rd of this year.
Okay. And what is it now?
So now I went and I actually got a harrow here. Sorry, let me scooch over. So I finally got a harrow over the original one to cover it up and fix it the way I always wanted it. And I got that done on the 3rd of May because my 50th birthday was the 19th. So I thought for my 50th, it was finally time to go ahead and fix it. And then just for karma and balance, I decided to also get a YBF on the other arm just to kind of balance them out. Oh.
Yeah. All right.
So,
it took you 50 years, and for 50, didn't take you 50 years. It took you
28.
You're walking around with this mess on your arm.
Yes.
Did anybody know what it was? Why'd you keep it?
Yeah. So it wasn't that noticeable unless you were close to me. But what a lot of people noticed was the lines of the harrow on it. So the most common question I used to get was, did you burn your arm on like a barbecue grill? What is that? And then I would explain the story behind it. And they're like, why don't you get that fixed? And this was the thing I struggled with. I was like, yeah, it looks horrible and I should get it fixed. But part of it was also like, this is a reminder of my first year of hashing, a memento from hashing in Korea, which those of us that were there always like to call it the land of the not quite right. Like I struggled for a long time with, do I cover it or do I leave it the way it was as a reminder of who I was when I was 22 and dumb? A good part of it was this past interam down in New Orleans at Halloween. I ran into Backdoor Dwarf and Up the Butt Bob, who I haven't seen either of those guys since I was in Korea when I left in '99.
They've been hashing since then too?
Dwarf doesn't hash as much. His wife is a pretty active hasher. They live outside of Vegas. He basically kind of says, when my wife goes to big events, I go too. Up the Butt Bob, when he came back to the States, was with Music City out in Tennessee. I think he moved up to Oregon for a while. When I ran into him, he was getting ready to move back to Tennessee.
Let me just tell anybody who's not from the States and maybe not of our generation, what the name Up the Butt Bob refers to. I don't know what his name refers to, but it's a famous thing on the Newlywed Game. We'll let people look that up.
Yeah.
All right. So you ran into them, and what happened?
So I was kind of talking with them because I want to say it was Dwarf, but kind of saw it on my arm and was like, oh my God, you haven't fixed that. And I had mentioned to them, my 50th is coming up and I've really been torn about getting it fixed or not, and the whole memento. And both of them were basically like, it looks like shit, dude, and you've had it long enough. It's time to get it fixed. Just pull the trigger and do it. But for me, it was kind of like getting that affirmation from guys that were there when I originally did it. Was kind of like, all right, yeah, I think it's okay now, so I can go ahead and do it.
Yeah, that's good. All right, we're gonna talk about hash tattoos a
Okay.
little later. I want to find out what happened to you in '99, where you moved, how you ended up where you are.
Okay. So yeah, so I was supposed to go to Fort Walton Beach, Florida, to Eglin Air Force Base. I was going to work on the gunships. I was what was called a sensors technician. So on the U-2, which is what I worked on, the spy plane, I worked on the cameras and the mapping reconnaissance systems. I was going to work on the infrared targeting systems and all that on there. As I was out processing Korea, I got notified that my assignment had changed and that I was being redirected to Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska.
Say that base name again.
Offutt Air Force Base.
Okay.
Yep. So I was confused, for one, because I had pulled a lot of strings and called in some favors to get that assignment in Florida. And second of all, there wasn't an assignment for my job at Offutt. Our job did not have positions there. So they were like, all we know it's something special duty. You'll find out when you get there. When I showed up, it turned out that I'd been selected to work on a platform called the Open Skies, and it was a reconnaissance aircraft. It was a modified Boeing 707, or for military, a 135, that used to be a refueler, and then they took all the refueling parts out of the back and just put a bunch of cameras in there. So it worked on this mission that went all over Europe and Russia in a joint treaty with them, and we would go over there and photograph their country, and then they would come over and photograph ours. So they kidnapped me because at the time the Air Force had pretty much switched to digital cameras. There wasn't a lot of what we call wet film cameras still, but the U-2 worked wet film. So I had experience in the style of cameras that they used. The nice thing was I went from just being a ground maintainer to actually being aircrew. So I got to fly on the aircraft. I would reload the cameras in flight and perform maintenance on them in the aircraft. So that's how I ended up at Omaha. Shortly after I got here, the first thing I did was try to look up the hash, but obviously this is still long before social media. I think MySpace was barely even beginning back then. But the one thing there was, like the Flying Booger website and Global Trash. So that was like the yellow pages of kennel. I went into that and looked up Omaha and found out Omaha had a kennel, the only kennel in Nebraska. There was a phone number you called, and it was one of the two founders, Forrest Gimp's phone number. And it was an automated answering machine that basically he left a message saying, here's the information for the next hash and blah, blah, blah. Don't leave a message. I'm not going to listen to it. Omaha had been founded by Forrest Gimp and On Her Knees in the summer of '96. It was at the time I found out.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Do you know
Yeah.
where they hashed from before that? What traditions they brought?
Forrest, I believe, was a San Antonio hasher, and On Her Knees, I think, had ties with St. Louis.
Okay.
So Omaha was the original founded Nebraska kennel. Back then, for a second, they called it the Husker Hash House Harriers, and then they very quickly just changed it to Omaha. So I go out, I think it was hash number 51 was the first one, and I was excited. I got to meet all these cool hashers again, and then the trail's over, and they're like, all right, see you next month. And I'm like, next month? My mother hashed, Osan hashed every weekend. Come on, guys. And they were like, nope, it's a once a month kennel. But the cool thing was, because I literally didn't know anybody in the Midwest. I grew up on the East Coast when I was in the States growing up, and I'd been stationed in Texas and California. So I had no ties to the Midwest at all. But the following weekend, several of the Omaha hashers swung by my apartment knocking on the door and were like, hey, we know you're not from around here and you probably don't know anything. So we're all going to go grab a beer if you want to hang out. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with Omaha, was that they immediately identified that I wasn't from here, that they knew we weren't going to hash for a month, but they really went out of their way to involve me and take me out and show me some fun.
Very cool. Let's just go back to Osan about t-shirts. What were you getting then? What were they doing for those?
We had a shirt at the time, and it said, never underestimate the power of stupid people in large crowds. So that was pretty much like the only hash shirt we had. You would earn items based on your numbers of hashing. So on one, you got a virgin streamer. On 5, you got a bell, a little ding-a-ling. On 6, when you got named, you got a namer streamer. And then every multiple after that, on the 10s, you would get a streamer. On the odd ones, the 5 odds, you would get like an ID holder to put your streamers on. You'd earn a whistle, you'd earn a coin, and things like that. Because at Osan, you didn't just get a whistle, you had to earn your whistle at 25 hashes. But the only t-shirt was if you brought out 10 virgins, they gave you a t-shirt that had like tiki guys throwing a lady into a volcano, and it said, "Fuck a virgin, bring me a slut." Then when you left, there was a goodbye t-shirt they had made that showed a hasher running to the airport in Seoul with hash marks, and then all the members of the kennel would sign the shirt for you when you left.
Have you got those?
I do, in the other room. I still never worn it. I've still got it.
All right, maybe we'll get those photographed to put
Okay.
with your published episode here. We're going to talk about Omaha landing. So it's really cool. They just said, "Hey, come on, you're one of us." What about how different the traditions were, how different Omaha was from Osan?
There wasn't a ton of differences. There were subtle things like the way the hash marks were. Like in Osan, when we would do trails, we had so many people, it would start and end at the same place, but it was like a running trail and a walking trail, like a turkey eagle for the whole length. So any mark other than a blob of flour, like if it was a check or a harrow or anything, would also have an R or a W and the number of the run on there, so you didn't cross the wrong trail. The marks in general, some of the marks we had in Korea were completely different than Omaha. And as one kennel to another, they're different. Like I learned really quick for hash warm up, they didn't sing Daddy Rabbit, they sang Father Abraham. The songs, the down down songs, were obviously different songs. And trying to think, the head who said head, the way the chant went was just slightly different than the way I was used to, the cadence and the way the verses were.
Sounds pretty familiar though. Maybe because there was a lot of, it's kind of American centric in both of them.
Yeah.
Let's just jump around, because with the cornfield in the background, there's an event that you were at the very beginning of. It's called Mink.
Yep.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit of what you know about how it started and what it is and why you're a survivor.
Mink originally started with all of us in the Midwest. We have a limited window of decent weather here because it's either winter or extremely hot summer. But you try to get your campouts in the spring and the fall on a good weekend so you're not dying or freezing. I always tried to make it a point when I got there to reach out to hash with the Missouri kennels, the Iowa kennels, to the Kansas kennels. But because of the weather, it seemed like all of our campouts were always the same weekend. So I want to do this, but it's also our weekend. And it really became this whole decision of, what am I not going to do this? And it also kept us apart from each other because we really weren't getting a chance to go out and spend time. So I was not there when the idea came about. My wife, 𝐏𝐨𝐝, has been on and off the GM of Omaha forever. She is the planner, the organizer. I've been the RA. I'm the disorganized jester in a hat. So we were hanging out, I think, at one of our campouts, and there were several hashers doing this little, like, they had all gone out on this kayaking float trip, I want to say in Missouri, and there were representatives from Missouri, Iowa, and Kansas at this event. And they just kind of got to talking about how much it sucks that we can never camp with each other because we're always stepping on each other's toes. And they suggested, just amongst the 3 of those states, doing a joint thing. And then I think it was Sputer from Iowa who said, let's call 𝐏𝐨𝐝, because I'm pretty sure Nebraska would definitely want to be a part of this. So we got the call while they were discussing it, and my wife was like, of course, obviously. And that also allowed us to get the N in there for Mink: Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas. So that was what we decided. And for all the states except for Nebraska, most of them have multiple kennels. So the thought was, we'll be able to host more people, bigger than maybe we're used to, but every state only has it once every 4 years. And then when it comes around to the state, the kennels can also rotate, so it doesn't fall on the same group on a regular basis. Us here in Nebraska, we have had other kennels for a minute. Omaha's the only active kennel for a long time now, so it's always us, but we've been doing it for so long, it's kind of just like hitting the reset button. We have a good location that we continue to use. We've used now for 2 or 3 times, that we plan on using in the future. But it's just basically, like, we call it the Midwest Inner Hash. It's an opportunity for us to be able to hang out and see each other every year, because this year is actually going to be Iowa's turn, and we're getting ready to go here. It's the week before 4th of July, because I know Nash Hash is the 4th of July weekend, so Mink is happening the weekend prior to Nash Hash. But the Survivor came around, just a last minute thought. After the first rotation, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas, when we showed up at Kansas, they came around and gave us patches that were modified from the show Survivor season 1. And we got a mug, and they were like, "Congratulations, you're a Survivor." So I was like, "Oh, this is cool." So we've been continuing that through the rotations. This is from season 2, and we did a
Very cool. Yeah.
Survivor patch. And then we actually embroidered everyone's hash names who did it. And since season 2 was Australia, we did boonie hats. So we've kind of been doing that ever since. Now, in order to be a Survivor, you have to do them in order. It has to be Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas. You can't start in the middle and end. But if you do all 4 in sequence, then you get the patch and you get the gimme item. Up until this last rotation, we've unofficially joked about the ultimate survivors, those of us that have been at all of them. And the numbers have been dwindling for a long time, but it was, I think, either the last Mink at Missouri or the one prior in Kansas. Everybody but me and my wife fell off the list.
Oh, so it's just your house. Yeah.
Yep. So just myself and Joe Bait are the only 2 ultimate survivors left that have been at every single Mink now.
Yeah. Are there any traditions that Mink has that are just Minks?
They usually do kind of like a Mr. and Mrs. Interam. They'll do like a Mr. and Mrs. Mink. They always do the midnight naked shooting star naked run. One of the traditions we do, especially to encourage intermingling since we're together, is we'll do a kennel hosted shot stop trail. So each kennel hosts a shot stop, so you get to have a little local flavor of them and get to meet those hashers, kind of forced intermingling. Draft Punk is really popular there. So that's a collection of beer aficionados. You'll bring local beers from where you're from, and then we'll all have a time in like the main dining hall. And it's just a big buffet free for all of sampling different local beers and drinks from different areas.
Yeah, that's good stuff. What about, are there always hash virgins that end up at a Mink?
There aren't a lot, but there are a few. Like, we always kind of laugh when we're like, "Oh, wow, you're starting with a Mink. Good for you." But yeah, we do get a handful of them here and there, not as prevalent. I don't know that I've ever seen namings at Mink, if they've happened or not, but it's not uncommon to see at least a handful of them running around.
Let's go to Omaha. Jailbait's been in and out of GM. When did you first become RA, and what's your philosophy or approach to being RA?
I would say I got there in 99. It was probably 4, 5, 6 years down the road that I finally stepped into RA. And it was one of those, I always felt intimidated by the role, because in Omaha, the RA runs the circle, runs the chalk talk, runs the circle. The GMs really just focus on the administrative part of it, coordinating with the hair raiser, with the treasurer. We always joke in Omaha about church and state. You see the preacher, you don't see the office manager. I got into RA just because of me being me. My wife says I could sell ice to an Eskimo. I have the gift of gab. So RA's always made more sense to me being in that role. And I've honestly, on and off, probably been RA a dozen times, depending as. With Omaha now, we tend to rotate 2 GMs and 2 to 3 RAs, just for not if somebody can't be there in coverage, but also to try to get some new people in there that don't feel too daunted with it all being on them, that has someone that can kind of guide them into it and show them the ropes.
And has Omaha changed? How has it changed from 99 to 2026? Omaha hash.
I guess I would say if it's changed in one way, and this kind of counteracts what I said earlier to a point. But when I joined Omaha, some of the guys from the kennel came out of their way to get me out when we weren't hashing. I think that has, in general, amongst Omaha hashers, evolved even more. A vast majority of us hang out all the time outside of the hash. Other kennels call us incestuous because of how much we are all actually in each other's lives on a regular and daily basis. When I first joined Omaha, there were small little groups that would go out and hang out, but the kennel in general as a whole kind of showed up, did the run, and kind of went their own way. Where over all these years, I definitely feel that it has evolved more than just the day of the hash.
And you personally finished up with the military now.
Yep, I retired in February of 2015.
Did that affect your hashing or participation, or was it now I'm going to do something different when I'm not in the hash?
Ironically, no. That was one of my issues when I got the job with this air crew position. Was I started going all over the world. I went to Russia a million times, but I would go to a lot of places in Europe. When I left that airframe and went to my second one, it went a lot more around Asia. So I actually had been to Kuala Lumpur 3 times. The problem with both missions was we were always in country Monday through Friday. And almost everywhere I went, the local kennels would hash on Saturdays. So I always felt like I got so close to being around other kennels, but I never really got a chance to hash with any of them. The only exception would be on my first mission, we would go in country Monday through Friday, but we would spend the weekend in England at Mildenhall Air Force Base. I would go out and hash with Cambridge on the weekends. So I've hashed with them a handful of times. But as far as the rest of them, there really wasn't a huge opportunity while I was there to branch off and go be able to do a trail. So
Okay, so you're a mink survivor, and you mentioned the last Inter-Americas, which I didn't make. What about your U.S. travel then, since you've retired?
okay, so during and before we got into the USA Nash hashes, starting with Memphis. I know me and my wife and a lot of us in Omaha, like we've been to every single one since. Unfortunately, this year, I think Ohio's hosting it this year because it's on the 4th of July. This is going to be the first one we've missed in a while. We've done a lot of the interams. We started with Winter Park. We've done Savannah. We did New Orleans. We missed Phoenix and the Hash Cruise interam. We try to get out to those when we can. We've done a Jolly Roger cruise once out of Tampa. So we went down and did Mexico, Honduras, Belize, Grand Cayman. And just on top of that, like we really try to go out of our way stateside to go hash. Like before Minx started up, my wife used to grab some of the Harriettes with Omaha and they would do what they called the trifecta. They would go down to Kansas, Larryville, would hash on Thursday night. They would run over to Two Moon in Missouri, who hashed on Friday nights, and then they would hit Kansas City on Saturday, and they would hit 3 hashes in 3 days and then come back. Since Mink, they haven't really done that as much, but I know me and my wife have always, if we're going, like when I've gone and visited my family in Tennessee, I've tried to make it a point to get out and hash with Music City whenever I'm out that way. So we really always try. When I first came back from the States, before I even got stationed here in Omaha, I took some time off en route and stayed with my parents in Atlanta. So my first stateside hash was actually Atlanta H4. I hashed with those guys, and Ouch and Tripod took me under their wing and even scurried me down to Emerald Coast one weekend. And I went down and hashed with those guys on they had a little hotel rented on the bay there and did a weekend with them. So
Make it to Fort Walton Beach?
been there a few times, yeah. Me and my wife have always tried to, if we're going to be somewhere and there's an opportunity to get a local kennel, and we've always really tried to make that a part of it.
Have you kept track of anything for any length time? You have any idea how many times you've hashed?
That's one of my biggest regrets is that I've never tracked like my total runs or my total hairs. My wife, Jailbait, has really tried her best. We had pretty decent books in Omaha as far as like hair tracking and numbers. We had an incident at one point where our scribe left the kennel and the records were lost with them. And she's rebuilt as much as she can. So since that point on, she has really kept really detailed numbers on that. She's also very involved with mink in that regards, keeping the mink master sheet of everyone who's ever done it, how many times and all of that. It's just something, unfortunately, I never started early enough. And then it just got to the point where it was pretty much impossible to figure out. So the only thing I have done, and it's another tattoo, is, let's see if I can get this in here. So I do keep a foot of every kennel I've hashed with in chronological order. So that's been my way of keeping track of where I've been, is when I hash with a new kennel, I add a foot onto my leg with their name on it. And I'm 9 behind right now. I've got to get time to get down there and get it updated again.
How many you got with being 9?
I'd say right now there's probably around 30, 35 on there.
That's great. All right. So how long does it take? How many of those 9 can you get in a session when you get time to go to a parlor?
For the 9, I'll probably be able to knock them out in one session, because the way I have them done is I always prefer the artist to use a small single needle, because it's a really small finite thing and I don't want the ink bleeding out over time and being illegible.
All right. So we have hash necklaces and t-shirts, and tattoos are something that's obviously a big part of you. Let's talk about that group you created.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's about 10 years ago now. I kind of started it with my own, just finding a place for it, but I created the Hash House Harriers Tattoo Facebook page, and it is a private page. I'm the sole admin on it. Right now, we're only averaging about 300, 400 members, but I wanted to kind of create a safe space, because hashers, especially hashers who get tattoos, want to show that, but they obviously sometimes don't want that shown publicly. It's something more private. So that's what I was kind of leaning towards, is creating that, and then also giving a space for somebody who's thinking about getting one that doesn't know what to do. It's a good community to reach out and say, I want a hash tattoo, but I don't know what I want. Does anyone have any good ideas? Kind of the only unofficial rule we have in there is don't straight up copy what somebody else has done. You can be inspired by what somebody else has done, but don't just go, I want that, and then download the image and have them put the exact same thing on you, because a lot of us like our stuff to be original.
Yeah, that's very cool. All right. So let me ask you something that sort of slipped by. What about your approach to being an RA? If somebody had seen you, what do you think, and what do people think is your approach to an RA?
If I had to guess, I do like it to be light and airy and fun. That being said, I spent 20 years in the military and I grew up in a military family. So I also like order, organized chaos, if you would like to call it that. Anyone that's hashed with me or been in a circle that I've run, whether it was a local hash or a mink or even Interam, because New Orleans Interam, Omaha was invited to host one of the trails. So we did one of the trails in New Orleans, and myself and 𝐏𝐨𝐝𝐚𝐬𝐭 Nut Tugger co-RA'd the circle there. I like it to flow evenly and smoothly. And that goes back to my mother hash with Swallow the Leader. He dealt with a rowdy group of 90 to 100 people every Saturday, and he could still keep the ball rolling, still have fun, everyone laugh, have a good time, drink a beer, but could keep the tempo going to get through what we needed to get through. And I've always kind of had that approach. If I'm doing my job right, you won't even notice that I'm pushing you down the aisle, but everything is going in an organized, orderly position. The only time I've ever gotten, not trying to use the word militant but stern for me, and it's one of the things that matter more than probably anything else, is a naming ceremony. I have been to many naming ceremonies where everybody was annihilated drunk, and it was terrible. I've seen horrible names given. I've seen people go half an hour and say, we're going to do this later, we can't come to an agreement. So when it comes to namings, I always started by saying, I want you to remember how important it was for you to get your hash name, and apply that same level of respect to the person we're about to do it for now. So if anyone's ever seen me almost yell at somebody during a circle, it would definitely be during a naming ceremony, because I do take them very seriously.
That's very cool. Is there any place you want to hash that you haven't been to yet?
Well, I'd love to get back to Kuala Lumpur, but I always figured that wasn't going to happen, because I got to go there 3 times with the military and never got to hash. But I've been to some amazing places. One, I wouldn't necessarily say that I hashed, but I don't know if you've heard of it. There's an island called Ascension Island. It's owned by the British. It's off the western coast of Africa. There's no indigenous population there. There's all contract workers there. The Air Force, there's like a relay station there, but they have some really beautiful mountains. It's all lava rock and paths. And I was hiking around one day and they leave journals all over where people sign. And I did open that up and see other hashers had signed it where they were from. So I added my name to that.
Cool.
I
know
mean,
in every guest book in the world with
oh,
on, with on. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to Hawaii probably 7 or 8 times. I've taken my wife there once. We went to Oahu on our honeymoon. We didn't get a chance to hash. So if anything, it'd be cool to actually get some time to do a trail there. For me, it's anywhere. If I haven't been there, I want to hash there, whether it's something beautifully scenic or something down and dirty. Some of my best trails are the ones where we spent the whole trail climbing through a storm drain for 3 miles. So I'm always been up for just something I haven't done before.
I wanted to ask you one other thing. You've been an RA, so is the RA always right?
Absolutely.
Okay, that didn't take long. Or no doubt there. Let's talk about the future of the hash.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have the many decade perspective in a couple countries, seeing military, civilian, long running mismanagement, big national, international events.
Mm-hmm.
And things change and the hash ages and new people come. You dropped into hashes and you felt right at home as soon as you got them. And everything seems to be, the hashing culture is clear. Mm-hmm. What about 50 years from now? If you had to guess, we're making it 90 years since the very first hash, and American hashing has lasted 40, almost 50 years. What do you think?
I think there'll always be a part of it that is what it is, whether we're all running on robot legs or doing it virtually or not, depending. But in 28 years of hashing, are things different than they were 28 years ago? Absolutely. And I could rattle off 15 things that are different and that have culturally changed that I've seen from where I've been. That being said, there's also 50 things that are exactly the same. So obviously, with the one thing any kennel that survived long term, and Omaha's gone through this, knows, is that the only way a kennel survives is fresh blood. Well, I've known many kennels that died because you had a core group of people that weren't willing to change. When people showed up with new ideas, they didn't want to hear them. And those kennels eventually withered and died. The life's blood, fresh perspectives, new people is paramount to a kennel existing. Now, and that being said, they are going to come in with some ideas or some suggestions of things you haven't thought of or haven't done and may or may not want to do. But in order to keep that constant churn of fresh blood into it, you got to do it. If one thing I would say I've seen that has increased, not so much on a day-to-day hash, but at campouts, whether it's Nash hashes or minks or interams, is I feel that when I started 28 years ago, a risque thing would be a boob check where a girl flashed her tits for a half second. I've been to Alabama Nash hash where I walked in a bathroom and a Harriet was getting peed on for 8 guys to earn a patch. While I don't agree personally or would want to participate in things of that nature, I understand that there are hashers that enjoy that subculture of life and that they're going to do it. I have had to stop myself from having old man syndrome and be like, hey, you kids, knock that shit off. Because obviously it's not what I want to do, but I understand that in a safe environment where everyone's participating willingly, that's something they do want to do. And it's something that I've had to come around with and go, look, as long as it's not affecting me and it's not hurting anybody, it is what it is. And that's just one example. The other thing, being a Midwesterner, that I still can't wrap my head around is this sudden, in the last 2 years, absolute worship of Malort.
Yeah, we actually had to have a Malort mile.
Yeah.
anniversary weekend of Hogtown, and it is popular. And if we had a beer mile, I don't think we'd have as many people participating, but it's there for the, I think.
And that's another thing. Like, I have accidentally had gummy soaked in Malort, and that was enough for me. But we've got members of our club now that have been totally indoctrinated into the Church of Malort, and it's just, I don't get it, but if that's what the kids are doing this day, so
You can offer them soju. Let's just cover one more thing for history.
Sure.
History, 5 years ago, COVID. How did Omaha deal with that?
So we followed the bandwagon that other kennels did for a minute, which was doing the virtual circles on Zoom. And much like anything else, we kind of ran into the same issue that a lot of other people did with it, where since you weren't walking on trail and working off that alcohol, people were getting intoxicated very quickly, and it caused a ruckus sometimes on those Zooms with people just being drunk, saying something, upsetting somebody else, and you're all sitting there staring each other in the face. So we did that for a brief second, and then the second restrictions started to lighten up. We were very quick to adopt hashing with spacing. What we did was everyone had to have masks. We had sanitation there. It was BYO. We had a beer angel set up where you could drop off, bring your own beer in your own little cooler with your own ice. You're going to put it in this vehicle. She's going to be at every beer stop, and she's just going to open it up. You go in and get your beverages, and you got to cover your circle and your trail beer, the whole thing. We didn't charge for it, obviously, because everyone was bringing their own. And we just kind of did that until restrictions lightened up and we could go back to business as usual. But we do have some really outstanding group photos where it's like all of us standing 6 feet apart from each other, this giant wide panoramic shot, and we're all just, hey,
We're still here.
yeah.
Good for you. Good for you for Omaha staying strong all these years, for being there all the way through Mink. That's another one that sounds like it's going to last forever.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, thanks on behalf of the Hash for everything you've done, and your RN at Inter-Americas and everything. So it's a good hashing life you've had.
Oh, yeah.
And your attitude's great. Good stories. Good spend time.
I wouldn't change it for the world. For those who know me and know my wife, Jailbait, we met because of hashing. My wife was a Lincoln hasher, and I was an Omaha hasher, and we couldn't be two completely different people. My wife grew up in a small town in Nebraska. Her family had a generational farm for a long time, and she kind of grew up in that environment as a kid. And I was a military brat that was living all over the world. If it wasn't for hashing, we would have never found each other. And we just celebrated our 19th wedding anniversary, and I couldn't imagine it being with anybody else.
That's congratulations. You know what we call people like you who met their partner on the hash? Bottom feeders. You can proudly be a hasher bottom feeder. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Then you've kind of answered the question, but I'm just going to ask it maybe for a wrap up here. Is hashing good for marriage, and is marriage good for hashing?
I think it depends on the couple. In my experience, if both are active hashers, it always, for the most part, works out quite well. When it's one person's a hasher and the other isn't, I've always seen that kind of as a 50-50 gamble. I do know couples that the one spouse wants nothing to do with the hash, but they are perfectly fine with their partner being involved in it, and they've been together forever. I've also seen couples that tried that, and it either ended up with the one being told you can't hash anymore, or that relationship doesn't last. At the end of the day, I honestly think it comes down to the individuals involved and where they feel with each other, because I've seen it work both ways. It just depends.
Yeah. Good for you. Congratulations on all that. I guess that picture of the cornfield's not your backyard.
No.
And just for a news update, the next World Interhash is in Kuching, back in Malaysia, but it was 24 votes from being in Korea.
Oh, wow.
And the next interim is down in Orlando, Florida. Is that something you're probably going to show up at if people want to meet you?
It's one of those, I got to look at the schedule. As I said, my wife is the organized one. She's the keeper of our social calendar. So if she tells me we can go, we're definitely going to be there.
All right, Woody, it's great. Thank you for sharing all your time with us.
Thank you.
I'm with you. You're a good positive force for hashing, obviously. I think that's it. Anything else you want to say to the hashing world?
If you haven't yet, if you want to check out what's going on in the Midwest, come out and try mink. You won't be disappointed.
Excellent. On.
On, brother.
To close the circle, here's the hash anthem sung by Mother Hash.
Swing low, sweet child.